And at number 10, we unravel the story of an American IT specialist who booked a fantasy honeymoon to a private island resort only to find himself embroiled in a nightmare of diplomatic complications and a high-stakes court battle that asked, was this premeditated murder, or was it a desperate, terrible consequence of drink and domestic conflict? Stay tuned, because the final verdict only deepened the trauma. Number 10. Bradley Robert Dawson, The Paradise Lost in Fiji. The Illusion of Perfection. The brochures for Turtle Island Resort in Fiji paint a picture of paradise, a sanctuary of blinding white sand, turquoise water, and absolute privacy, designed for couples seeking the ultimate romantic escape. It is a place where every worry, every shadow of conflict is meant to dissolve into the tropical air. When Bradley Robert Dawson, a 40-year-old IT specialist from Memphis, Tennessee, booked this lavish honeymoon for himself and his new wife, Christy Chen Dawson, 36, they were buying into that illusion. They had been married for just 5 months, a relationship that, on the surface, looked like the culmination of success. Christy, a pharmacist originally from Denver, Colorado, was vibrant and successful. Bradley worked for a nonprofit, Youth Villages. They represented the modern, affluent American couple. But within those 5 months of marriage, the foundation was already cracking under immense pressure. The invisible seed of tragedy. Investigators would later meticulously piece together the narrative of escalating domestic conflict. Friends and family members spoke of frequent, intense arguments, a volatile dynamic that belied the public smiles. The honeymoon, which began on July 7, 2022, was intended to be a reset button, a place so beautiful, so isolated, that their troubles would simply vanish. Instead, the isolation acted as a pressure cooker. By the evening of July 8, 2022, the seeds of tragedy had been fully watered. The couple spent the evening at the resort's floating bar. They were drinking and dancing, seemingly enjoying themselves with the resort staff, but beneath the veneer of revelry, tension was mounting. The arguments began, whispered at first, then escalating with the rising consumption of alcohol. The resort, designed for perfect romance, was about to become the site of a brutal, unspeakable act. The midnight hour of violence. Sometime in the early morning of July 9, 2022, around 2 a.m., the dispute that had simmered at the bar boiled over inside their luxury villa. What exactly was said? What small word, what drunken accusation triggered the fatal explosion? That remains sealed between the walls of the Fijian courtroom and the conscience of the accused. What we do know is the gruesome result. Bradley Dawson allegedly launched a savage, lethal assault on his wife. Christy Chen was beaten to death in the bathroom. The violence was not contained, it was catastrophic. According to subsequent forensic reports, the sheer unimaginable force used was enough to send Christy Chen Dawson's head through a ceramic toilet water tank. She sustained multiple blunt trauma wounds to her head, injuries that spoke not to an accidental fall, but to a focused, overwhelming rage. Could this have been prevented? What does it say about the safety of a woman when her partner's final expression of commitment is brutal, fatal violence? The question hangs heavy over every luxury resort that promises escape and delivers only isolation. The desperate flight. As the sun rose over the pristine Yasawa archipelago, the contrast between the resort's beauty and the horror within the villa was absolute. Bradley Dawson did not call for help. He did not confess. Instead, he made a cold, calculated decision. He fled. He gathered his passport and belongings, the actions of a man prioritizing his own escape over his wife's life, and took a kayak to a nearby island. This move, prosecutors would later argue, was the definitive proof of guilt and premeditation. Why take your passport if your actions were truly an accident? Resort staff, sensing that something was terribly wrong when the couple missed 2 consecutive meals and a persistent "Do Not Disturb" sign remained on the door, finally entered the villa. The discovery was horrifying. The police were immediately alerted and a manhunt began. Dawson was apprehended about 36 hours later. He was no longer the charming American tourist. He was the prime suspect in an international murder case. The honeymoon had officially become a crime scene. The long arm of justice. The immediate aftermath involved a high-stakes diplomatic and legal battle between the U.S. and Fiji. The details that emerged during the investigation were heart-wrenching. Christy Chen's body was so severely damaged that, according to Crime Traveler, she could not be embalmed for the return trip to the U.S. Her remains had to be cremated in Fiji. This single fact became an emotional lightning rod, driving public fury. The trial, which began years later, culminated in December 2024. The jury's conviction of murder sent a definitive statement. In February 2025, just last month, making this a highly trending and relevant case, Bradley Dawson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years before any consideration of release. The court's final words provided a grim epitaph to the marriage. The judge emphasized that what should have been a joyful beginning was transformed into an unimaginable nightmare. The legacy of the Bradley Dawson case is a profound study in the danger of domestic secrets carried abroad and the failure of outward appearance to conceal inward rage. The open loop of speculation remains. What was the final breaking point of a marriage that lasted less than half a year? The Dawson trial successfully exposed the terrifying vulnerability that comes with isolating a struggling relationship on a honeymoon. But this kind of sudden, isolated tyranny is not unique to affluent island resorts. Our next case explores a seemingly devoted groom whose sudden need for control and deception led him to commit murder hours after saying "I do." The sheer audacity of his subsequent actions tests the very limits of human disbelief. A crime committed not miles from home, but right behind the family garden. Where in the world are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. Then stay with us as we uncover the true face of pure domestic evil, a groom who killed his wife and then tried to hide her in a suitcase for a fake honeymoon trip. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss the details of this shocking transformation from husband to homicide. Number 9. Thomas Nutt, The Wedding Night Suitcase. The promise, the lie. The wedding of Thomas Nutt and Dawn Walker in October 2021 should have marked a joyous chapter. Thomas Nutt, 46, and Dawn Walker lived in Lightcliffe, a quiet suburb near Halifax, West Yorkshire, England. Their relationship, however, was nothing but quiet. Neighbors recalled the terrifying sounds of domestic disputes, one even describing going to the house 2 months before the wedding after having never heard such screaming coming from a woman before. Dawn Walker had a history of making difficult choices, but she believed her marriage could be a fresh start. This belief was the ultimate tragic vulnerability. The wedding ceremony itself was the ultimate deception. The witnesses, the celebration, the vows, they were just stage dressing for an act of lethal control that Nutt had been rehearsing for years. This is the institutional failure critique applied to the family unit. How could a history of documented violence be so completely overlooked on the day of commitment? The wedding day was supposed to wipe the slate clean, but Nutt saw it as the deadline. The deadliest hours. Hours after saying "I do," after the last guest had left and the silence of the marital home descended, the truth of the relationship reasserted itself with brutal finality. According to Nutt's eventual, heavily self-serving confession, they argued. He claimed she started screaming and I have hit her in the face and put my arm around her. Whether it was hours after or the day after, the reality remains the same. Thomas Nutt killed his wife, Dawn Walker, on their wedding night. The murder itself was swift, driven by the desire to end the conflict and ultimately to end his commitment to her. But the crime was not the final horror. The cover-up was the true expression of his cold-blooded nature. He did not panic. His immediate actions were chillingly methodical. First, he stored her body in a cupboard. The bride, fresh from her wedding, was hidden from view. Next came the unimaginable. He found a suitcase. The very luggage, perhaps intended for a romantic getaway, was now repurposed to contain his dead wife. He then dumped the suitcase in bushes behind their home on Shirley Grove. The fake story he crafted was a study in psychological manipulation. When questioned by police, he spun a tale of a spontaneous 2-day caravan honeymoon to Skegness. He told them Dawn had suddenly left him after a bitter fight, even claiming she had threatened to falsely accuse him of rape. He painted himself as the victim, the confused, heartbroken groom whose wife had abandoned him. But the plan was quickly unraveled by the simplest of surveillance technology. Nutt was captured on CCTV moving the suitcase containing his wife's body. He had gone to Skegness alone, leaving his dead wife literally on his property under a thin veil of foliage. This was the necessary catalyst for the law to step in. Justice served cold. When confronted with the truth, Thomas Nutt handed himself into the police station. He initially tried to plead manslaughter, claiming he did not intend to cause her really serious harm. The prosecution, however, systematically destroyed this defense, proving that the staging, the flight, and the suitcase were all evidence of calculated, post-meditated malice. The courtroom reaction was visceral. In August 2022, the jury took only 3 hours to deliberate before returning a guilty verdict for murder. The courtroom erupted in cheers, a collective exhale of societal relief that the ultimate betrayal had been punished. Nutt was sentenced to life in prison. The legacy of the Thomas Nutt case is a chilling reminder of the absolute danger of a calculated killer who uses the very definition of family and ceremony as camouflage. The question remains, why did he go through with the wedding at all, only to commit murder hours later? It forces us to confront the terrifying possibility that for some men, the ceremony itself is a necessary step to claim a partner's assets or simply a final, lethal act of control. Thomas Nutt's reign of terror ended with a single piece of surveillance footage. But sometimes, the monster is not a disgruntled partner, but a financially desperate spouse whose single horrific act takes place miles from shore, shielded by the terrifying anonymity of the open ocean. Our next case is one that was almost silent, a dark secret sealed by the vast, unforgiving ocean. This story involves a dual citizen who let his wife drown at sea during their delayed honeymoon, leading to a complex legal fight over involuntary manslaughter and stolen coins. Next, we look at the chilling yet complex story of Louis Bennett, a deadly act of greed on the open water. Number 8. Louis Bennett, the honeymooner who left his wife adrift. The ocean as a co-conspirator. The case of Louis Bennett defies the confines of a home or a hotel room. It is a tragedy set on the boundless, unforgiving water, where the very forces of nature were nearly weaponized to conceal a crime. Bennett, a 42-year-old dual citizen of Australia and the UK, and his wife, Isabella Hillman, 36, a naturalized US citizen born in Cuba, were on a delayed honeymoon cruise in May 2017. They had been married just 3 months. Bennett was an experienced sailor, while Isabella was not. This disparity became the crucial, fatal flaw in their journey. The narrative relies on the public's inherent sympathy for a sailor facing an emergency at sea, but investigators would quickly shatter that illusion, exposing a cold, calculated motive lurking beneath the waves. The final night of Isabella's life, May 15, 2017, off the coast of the Bahamas, began with a critical decision made by Louis Bennett. He claimed he was resting in the cabin and asked Isabella to take control of the boat for the night. The fatal negligence, prosecutors argued, was twofold. Not only was Isabella inexperienced, but Bennett also did not require her to wear a life jacket, harness, or personal locator beacon. This omission, in an experienced sailor, spoke volumes. Bennett claimed he awoke hours later to find the boat taking on water and his wife was gone, having seemingly fallen overboard. He maintained that he had done everything possible to save the boat, but not everything possible to save his wife. The psychological foundation of Bennett's conviction is rooted in a highly controversial financial motive. Isabella Hillman's disappearance, investigators later suspected, was simply an opportunity. Bennett was not just a grieving husband, he was a man deep in the throes of financial instability. The pattern of suspicion was immediate. The death was suspicious, but the shocking discovery that sealed his fate was not a nautical clue. When rescued, Louis Bennett was found to be transporting $100,000 in stolen gold and silver coins. Was this a random tragedy, Or was the cruise itself a carefully orchestrated money laundering trip that spiraled into murder when Isabella discovered the truth, or when Bennett realized the opportunity for insurance money? Prosecutors initially charged him with murder, alleging he had intentionally tried to sink the boat. They argued his expertise allowed him to selectively sabotage the vessel to look like an accident. The defense fought fiercely, arguing the difficulty of proving intentional murder at sea. The crucial turning point came in November 2018, when Bennett reached a plea deal, accepting guilt for involuntary manslaughter in Isabella's death and pleading guilty for transporting the stolen coins. This was the legal compromise necessary to secure a conviction. The subsequent sentencing, however, was a statement on the severity of the betrayal. Judge Federico Moreno, recognizing the depth of the crime and the suffering of Isabella's family, gave Bennett the maximum sentence under the plea deal: 8 years in prison. The judge's reasoning was profound and simple. Sentencing is for punishment. The question for the public remained: did 8 years truly equal justice for a life cut short by greed and negligence? The family attorney, Mitchell Kitroser, simply stated, "There is nothing that can or could be done to bring Isabella back." The lasting legacy of the Louis Bennett case is the brutal lesson that sometimes the greatest danger lies in the vast empty spaces where no witnesses can see and where greed and opportunity meet. Louis Bennett was eventually released after serving his time, but not all acts of familial destruction are so isolated. Our next subject also sought to destroy multiple families, although his method was consistent and his victim count was tragically high. This story involves an IT professional who specialized in scuba diving, a passion he turned into a quiet, untraceable weapon on the Great Barrier Reef. Next, we confront the chilling echoes of the Honeymoon Killer, Gabe Watson. The question is, what drove this seemingly normal man to commit murder just 11 days after saying "I do"? The answer involves a disturbing pattern of opportunity and the repeated failure of medical professionals to look beyond an act of God. Subscribe and stay tuned. The ocean's embrace failed to hide Louis Bennett's greed, and the suburban tranquility of West Yorkshire couldn't conceal Thomas Nutt's violence. But what happens when the perfect murder weapon is a passion, a shared hobby that requires absolute trust? What happens when that passion is taken to the deepest parts of the ocean? We continue our descent into the betrayal of the honeymoon, where the settings are stunning, but the intent is cold, calculated murder, often driven by a single terrifying motive: money. Number 7. Gabe Watson, the Great Barrier Reef's deadly secret. The lure of the deep. The Great Barrier Reef, off the coast of Queensland, Australia, is one of the world's natural wonders, a breathtaking labyrinth of color and life. It was the chosen destination for the honeymoon of David Gabriel Gabe Watson, an IT professional, and his new wife, Christina May Watson, nee Tina. They had married in Birmingham, Alabama on October 11, 2003. 11 days later, they were on a boat preparing for a dive that would seal Tina's fate. Gabe and Tina were on a dive trip to the SS Yongala wreckage. This location is not for novices. It is a 50-foot dive wreck labeled a red dive, reserved for advanced divers due to strong underwater currents and the depth. Gabe was experienced, logging 55 dives. Tina? She had completed only 5 training dives. This stark experience disparity wasn't a warning sign to Gabe. Prosecutors would later argue it was part of the plan. The conflict in this case is profound, the absolute reliance a novice diver places on their partner. Tina was not just trusting Gabe with her life on land, she was trusting him with the very air she breathed 50 feet below the surface. The event of October 22, 2003, unfolded in terrifying quickness. Gabe's account, which became the central point of contention for years, claimed that Tina panicked in the water, knocked his mask off, and when he recovered and tried to help, she had sunk 10 feet out of his reach. He claimed he then ascended to get help. It was a narrative perfectly tailored to sound like a tragic, unforgiving diving accident. But the Australian authorities and subsequent investigations in the US refused to accept this simplicity.
The core of the prosecution's case was built on two crucial pieces of evidence that shattered Gabe's story of accident. First, witness testimony from other divers on the trip. Dr. Stanley Stutz testified that he saw Gabe swim to Tina, put his arms under her armpits, and then let her go. Master diver Ken Snyder later told the court that Gabe's version of events, that a newly certified diver would sink 10 feet out of reach after a brief panic, was not plausible, given the physics of diving. Second, the motive was exposed: insurance. Prosecutors argued Gabe stood to gain $210,000 in insurance benefits, plus Tina's belongings, including her diamond engagement ring. This transformation of a romantic honeymoon into a calculated financial liquidation made the accident look like a cold, methodical murder. What does it say about a marriage when an insurance policy is taken out and a fatal trip is booked only days later? The question kept the loop of international controversy spinning. The legal aftermath of Gabe Watson's actions was complex and highly controversial, spanning 2 continents. In 2009, Watson, who had brazenly remarried in the years following Tina's death, traveled to Australia to face charges. In a stunning turn, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter, serving only 18 months in an Australian prison. The Australian media branded him forever as the Honeymoon Killer. However, the case refused to die. Upon his deportation to Alabama in 2010, he was immediately indicted on capital murder in the course of kidnapping and capital murder for pecuniary gain. Tina's father and friends were devastated by the Australian outcome and demanded U.S. justice. The most enduring image of the case, the tragic, ghostly photo of Tina lying lifeless on the ocean floor with her arms splayed, inadvertently captured by another diver, became an emotional icon. It was a silent witness to the horror. Yet, in a final break-hearting twist,
For Tina's family, the Alabama judge dismissed the murder case in 2012 due to lack of evidence, concluding that the prosecution's case lacked the necessary proof beyond a reasonable doubt for capital murder. The result was a profound, divided legacy. While Watson served time for manslaughter, the murder charge was dismissed, leaving a massive question mark hanging over his freedom. He remains free, having married again, while the world grapples with the terrifying concept of a killer who used a shared passion and the vastness of the ocean as the perfect, untraceable weapon. Gabe Watson's mask fell away, revealing the rot beneath his veneer of bad luck. But not all betrayals are for insurance. Sometimes the betrayal is for social status and pure, cold-blooded financial gain. A lust for wealth that led a British businessman to allegedly hire hitmen to kill his Swedish wife on their South African honeymoon. Our next subject involves a wealthy figure whose desire for a new life and a rejection of his wife led him to orchestrate a brutal, faked taxi hijacking. Next, we expose the chilling hypocrisy of SHRIEN DEWANI, the glamorous groom whose trial collapsed into a stunning dismissal. Number 6. SHRIEN DEWANI, the honeymoon hijacking conspiracy. The collision of worlds. The marriage of SHRIEN DEWANI, a wealthy Indian-British businessman, and Annie Nina Dewani, née Hindocha, a 28-year-old Swedish woman of Indian origin, was meant to be a union of 2 successful, affluent families. They married near Mumbai, India on October 29, 2010. Their honeymoon was a multi-stage affair, moving from the wildlife safari of Kruger National Park to the vibrant cosmopolitan setting of Cape Town, South Africa. South Africa, post-2010 FIFA World Cup, was trying to project an image of modern safety and prosperity. But the Dewani's decision to hire a local taxi driver, Zola Tongo, for a late-night tour led them to a collision with South Africa's harsher reality, or so the initial story claimed. On November 13, 2010, after dinner, Tongo drove the couple into the Guguletu township, a notorious area. Suddenly, 2 armed men hijacked the vehicle. The tragedy was swift and targeted. Andy was found shot dead,
SHRIEN was released unharmed. This sequence of events, the groom's safe release, the bride's execution, was immediately the core conflict that drove the investigation. It defied the logic of a simple random robbery. The narrative swiftly transformed from tragic crime to high-stakes conspiracy when the taxi driver, Zola Tongo, pleaded guilty to murder in December 2010. Tongo and his accomplices quickly claimed the crime was a murder for hire at SHRIEN's behest. Prosecutors alleged that SHRIEN, motivated by a desire to end the marriage and his wife's modest life insurance policy, had hired the hitmen to stage the hijacking and eliminate Annie. The psychological betrayal here was absolute, marrying a woman only to immediately plot her execution. Using the isolation of the honeymoon and the poverty of a foreign township as cover. The investigation became a diplomatic firestorm, leading to SHRIEN's eventual extradition from the UK to South Africa in April 2014. The world watched as the wealthy, seemingly devastated widower faced charges of murder. But the prosecution's case began to unravel violently during the trial in late 2014. The credibility of the key witnesses, Tongo and the accomplices, imploded under cross-examination. They were found to have fabricated telephone calls and contradicted previous statements and each other. Allegations of police torture and the use of irregular methods due to the high-profile nature of the case further tainted the evidence. The forensic issues were damning, with reports suggesting the original post-mortem showed the fatal bullet passed through Annie's hand before her chest, suggesting a struggle that contradicted the faked hijacking. The climax came in November 2014. The judge, seeing the prosecution's case had completely collapsed under the weight of its own flawed witnesses, made a stunning decision. He dismissed the case under Section 174. This was not an acquittal based on innocence, but a ruling that the prosecution had failed to establish a prima facie case requiring a defense. SHRIEN DEWANI was free to go. The result was a global crisis of faith in the South African justice system and the enduring profound suspicion of SHRIEN DEWANI himself. His dismissal was highly controversial, leaving the Dewani family devastated and the public questioning whether money and influence had, in the end, bought his freedom. The ultimate betrayal remains a matter of legal record. The truth was buried beneath a mountain of lies and compromised evidence. Annie Nina Dewani was murdered on her honeymoon, but the question of who ordered the killing was never conclusively answered in court, leaving the zygarnic loop of suspicion forever open. SHRIEN DEWANI's mask was shattered by a judicial dismissal.
And at number 5, we unravel the story of a young, excited couple who traveled to the Caribbean for their perfect 2-week honeymoon, only to find themselves embroiled in a nightmare of media speculation and a high-stakes diplomatic battle that asked, was this random chance? Or was this a failure of security on the ultimate trip? Stay tuned, because the fallout only deepened the tragedy. Number 5. Ben and Catherine MULLANY, the honeymoon that ended in a Caribbean tragedy. The date, July 27, 2008. The location, Coco's Hotel, Antigua. The victims, Ben MULLANY, 31, and Catherine MULLANY, 31, newlyweds from Wales. The perpetrators, Keneal Martin and Avi Howell. The summer of 2008 in Wales, UK, was a time of pure joy for Ben and Catherine MULLANY. Both 31, professional and deeply in love. They had married on July 12th in a beautiful ceremony. Their destination for the honeymoon was idyllic, the Coco's Hotel in Antigua, a collection of secluded, romantic beachfront cottages. They represented the pinnacle of middle-class happiness. They needed a perfect escape, and the Caribbean offered exactly that.
sun, sand, and quiet relaxation. But beneath the promise of this tropical paradise, the air was already thick with an unseen danger. Their trip was not about betrayal from within, but about the terrifying random violence that can strike anyone, anywhere. The cultural clash here was not between people, but between vulnerability and exposure. A secluded luxury resort is supposed to be a fortress of safety, yet its very isolation made it a soft target for local criminals. The plot itself was not a planned execution by the spouse, but a sudden, catastrophic moment on the night of July 27, 2008, the night before their scheduled return home. 2 weeks into their dream trip, the MULLANY's cottage was invaded by 2 armed men, Keneal Martin and A.V. Howell, during a robbery. The intrusion quickly escalated from theft to pure violence. Both Ben and Catherine were shot in the head. The sheer brutality of the act, the devastating window of violence during a simple burglary, made it difficult for the world to comprehend. The immediate aftermath was a global diplomatic event. The British media narrative shifted instantly from a romantic getaway to a horrific failure of tourist security. The victims were young, nearly married, and utterly innocent. The perception was palpable in the press. If this could happen to a young couple on their honeymoon, who was truly safe? The true unraveling of the case did not come from a hidden confession, but from relentless international pressure focused on achieving justice. Here lies the crucial, almost impossible point of confusion that kept the world glued to the story. The initial lack of quick arrests. The British government and the victims' families demanded accountability, applying intense pressure on the Antiguan authorities. When the police finally tracked down the perpetrators, Keneal Martin and A.V. Howell, the full, devastating picture of their criminal activity emerged. The 2 men were also found guilty of the murder of a local shopkeeper, Juanita Anderson, highlighting a broader pattern of violent crime. The subsequent legal maneuvering was a master class in international criminal justice. The defense tried to argue reasonable doubt, but the evidence linking Martin and Howell to the multiple crimes was compelling. When the Antiguan court returned its verdict in July 2011, the UK held its breath. Keneal Martin and A.V. Howell were found guilty of the murders and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, narrowly escaping the death penalty due to diplomatic opposition from the UK government. Yet the story is defined by its refusal to die. The MULLANY tragedy is a profound study in the ambiguity of international risk. Did the couple simply have unbelievably bad luck, or was the Antiguan government failing to secure their primary economic engine, tourism? The question keeps the loop perpetually open, reminding us that the trust placed in a remote destination can carry the ultimate invisible risk. The MULLANY trial successfully broke open the conversation about security in paradise resorts, but at the ultimate cost of a child's life. Tragically, one of the convicted killers, A.V. Howell, was shot dead by police in 2014 after escaping from jail, closing that loop with a dramatic act of finality. The legislative impact was immense. The Antiguan government introduced the death penalty for crimes involving weapons and imposed a minimum 25-year sentence for assault with a weapon. This crime didn't just end a honeymoon, it changed the law of a nation. This kind of hidden tyranny, where violence strikes from the shadows, is terrifying, but sometimes the monster arrives disguised as the person you walked down the aisle with. Our next case explores a seemingly devoted husband whose love of wealth and desire to escape a secret financial ruin led him to become a cold-blooded killer on an exotic island honeymoon. The sheer brutality of his act tests the very limits of human cruelty. Where in the world are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. Then, stay with us as we uncover the true face of pure domestic evil, a husband whose perfect honeymoon was nothing more than a carefully staged crime scene. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss the details of this shocking transformation from devoted husband to convicted killer.
Number 4. Arnold NAJIB, The Strangulation, Hidden in a Mauritian Paradise. The date, 2001. The location, Luxury Hotel, Mauritius. The victim, Tina NAJIB. The conspirator, Arnold NAJIB, husband. The story of Arnold NAJIB is not one of a quick random robbery like the MULLANY case, but a slow burn horror defined by methodical, calculated personal annihilation. It is a narrative built upon the gradual, patient use of a perfect setting to disguise a horrific act, a sustained campaign waged by one man against his new bride to secure a solitary future. This case bypassed the sensational headlines of passion and focused instead on the shocking, almost arrogant simplicity of his methods. It was a domestic terror that occurred during the most romantic trip of their lives, hidden in plain sight by the very definition of a luxury honeymoon. Arnold NAJIB presented an image of a successful, loving groom. He had planned a dream honeymoon to Mauritius, an island paradise synonymous with exclusivity and romance. To Tina, he was the perfect husband, taking her on the trip of a lifetime. This persona was the perfect disguise for a killer. Neighbors, family, and the hotel staff would later describe him as attentive and charming, but never dangerous. This immediately sets up our first psychological angle, the institutional failure critique. How could a luxury resort and a loving family fail to see the plot unfolding under the surface? NAJIB made his wife's death look like a sudden, violent home invasion, always adopting the role of the distraught, grieving husband. The abuse began subtly but escalated ruthlessly. Tina was found strangled in their luxury hotel room. Arnold's story was immediate and detailed. Burglars had attacked them both. The details unearthed by Mauritian investigators, however, were almost beyond comprehension, forming the core conflict that drove the eventual investigation. The scene was too perfect, too convenient. Investigators quickly noted the telltale signs of a staged scene. The forced entry appeared faked, and the evidence didn't match the level of violence NAJIB described. The crucial loop in this honeymoon story isn't the method of death, which was clearly strangulation, but the sheer lack of a genuine intruder. It was the Mauritian investigators who finally registered the statistical impossibility of a violent home invasion in a high-security, luxury resort that left the husband relatively unscathed while the wife was brutally murdered. This statistical anomaly was the necessary catalyst. The police response was swift, but the shock was palpable. Officers arriving at NAJIB's room found a scene of carefully orchestrated chaos. When confronted, NAJIB maintained his story, but the evidence, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. The police focused on the most critical piece of evidence, the fact that the only credible explanation for a faked break-in was a killer who already had the keys. The legal fallout was swift. NAJIB faced murder charges in Mauritius. The eventual legal outcome, a conviction for his wife's murder, avoided years of doubt, but still spelled out a life-altering sentence in an unfamiliar country. He was convicted in Mauritius and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The aftermath for Tina's family was dramatic, yet fraught with new challenges. They suffered from the realization that their charming new son-in-law, their trusted relative, was a calculated killer. The legacy of the Arnold NAJIB case is a profound study in the absolute danger of a calculated killer who uses the very definition of love and luxury as camouflage. It reminds us that the most frightening monsters are often the ones who appear the most devoted. NAJIB was finally confined to a foreign prison after a relentless, cross-border investigation. But not all acts of betrayal are so isolated. Our next subject also sought to destroy a family, though his method was consistent and his victim count was tragically high.
This story involves a seemingly loving husband who used the beauty of a Hawaiian hiking trail to push his wife to her death. Next, we look at the chilling yet complex story of Kyle Joseph Pennington, a fall from grace or a premeditated execution. Number 3. Kyle Joseph Pennington, the financial alibi on the Hawaiian Trail. The date, April 2004. The location, Waihi Ridge Trail, Maui, Hawaii, USA. The victim, Nadia Pennington. The conspirator, Kyle Joseph Pennington, husband. The case of Kyle Joseph Pennington defies the typical true crime structure of clear-cut evil. Instead, it is a study of the long-term consequences of a single, terrible financial decision and the slow, arduous process of legal and personal transformation into a killer. This narrative unfolds over a single, devastating honeymoon hike on the island of Maui, a protracted exercise in greed and penance that preys on the public's faith in the sanctity of a marriage contract. Pennington's life became a silent clock, counting down decades of lost freedom, all stemming from a moment of alleged impulsive violence against a helpless bride. His crime was a single, impulsive act committed under intense financial duress, and he had sought to hide it under the guise of an unfortunate honeymoon tragedy. The autopsy was quick with assessment of murder. The crucial turning point, the moment the transformation from panicked husband to convicted killer began, was the autopsy. Pennington had claimed Nadia fell down a steep cliff. However, the investigation found multiple blunt force injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. A simple fall would have resulted in one type of injury. Nadia's injuries suggested she had been struck or forced. The final climactic twist arrived in the courtroom. A relentless prosecution reviewed the financial records, the insurance policy, and the contradictory forensic evidence. The psychological and legal arguments were compelling. His crime was a single, impulsive act committed under intense financial duress, and he had sought to hide it under the guise of an unfortunate honeymoon tragedy. The court found him guilty of second-degree murder. The result was immense public discussion over the financial pressures of modern marriage. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The legacy of the Kyle Pennington case forces us to confront the immense moral question of how greed can shatter the most sacred of bonds. Kyle Joseph Pennington was finally granted justice against him after a careful review of forensic science. But not all acts of familial destruction are so isolated. Our next subject also sought to destroy multiple people, though his method was consistent and his victim count was tragically high. This story involves a seemingly loving husband who hired a professional to eliminate his wife so he could collect insurance money and continue an affair. Next, we confront the chilling echoes of the George TIAFFAY case, the Las Vegas firefighter who hired a killer to end his marriage. Subscribe and stay tuned.
Number 2. George TIAFFAY, the firefighter who hired the ultimate divorce. The date, September 2012. The location, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. The victim, Shauna TIAFFAY, wife. The conspirator, George TIAFFAY, husband/Las Vegas firefighter. The case of George TIAFFAY is a weight in the American psyche that few other domestic crime stories can match. It is a narrative forever synonymous with the absolute failure of a man to uphold his vows, choosing instead the ultimate cowardly betrayal, a contract killing. The crime committed here was the repeated, systematic attempt to eliminate his wife, achieved not by his own hand, but by paying a homeless man he knew from the local streets. This event was an absolute rupture in the fabric of trust, creating a legend that transcended simple homicide. George TIAFFAY was a respected Las Vegas firefighter. He was a hero to his community, a man whose profession was dedicated to saving lives. His wife, Shauna, was a respected accountant and mother.
Their marriage was, by all appearances, a typical American success story. But beneath the surface, TIAFFAY was leading a double life, engaged in an affair and deeply frustrated by the prospect of an expensive, difficult divorce. The core conflict of the TIAFFAY narrative, the one that allowed the plot to unfold, is the arrogance of entitlement. TIAFFAY believed his status as a first responder provided him with the ultimate camouflage. He saw his wife as a financial and emotional roadblock. The crucial loop that drove the investigation was the sheer desperation of the accomplice. TIAFFAY hired Noel Scott, a homeless man he'd met in a park, to kill Shauna. He paid him in small, incremental amounts, less than $5,000 for a human life. Scott, fueled by poverty and desperation, attempted the crime several times before finally succeeding in September 2012, brutally beating Shauna to death in her home. The initial lack of suspicion focused entirely on the apparent randomness of the home invasion, but local police began to realize the murder was too targeted for a random robbery. The crucial transformation from grieving husband to prime suspect came not from a physical clue, but from the accomplice's lack of control. Noel Scott, the killer, was arrested shortly after the murder for an unrelated crime. Under interrogation, he broke down and confessed to the contract killing, directly implicating George TIAFFAY. Scott's confession revealed the motive was simple, terrifyingly so: money and the freedom to pursue his affair. The trial was swift, concluding with Scott testifying against the man who paid him to kill. The evidence, including cell phone records and Scott's own testimony, sealed TIAFFAY's fate. The result was a loss of a devoted mother and a profound moral wound for the city of Las Vegas. George TIAFFAY was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The TIAFFAY case serves as a permanent reminder that sometimes the true horror lies not in the complexity of the plot, but in the purely human selfishness that precedes them. George TIAFFAY's mask fell away, revealing the rot beneath his veneer of heroism. But not all betrayals are for attention. Sometimes the betrayal is for social status and pure, cold-blooded financial gain. A lust for wealth that led a beautiful, high-society woman to kill her employers. Our next subject involves a seemingly devoted husband who used the context of their 12th wedding anniversary to push his wife off a sheer cliff for a massive insurance payout. Next, we expose the chilling hypocrisy of Harold Henthorn, the man who turned a surprise anniversary hike into a calculated murder. Number 1. Harold Henthorn, the Rocky Mountain Anniversary Murder. The date, September 29, 2012. The location, Deer Mountain, Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, USA. The victim, Dr. Tony Bertoli Henthorn, 50, ophthalmologist. The conspirator, Harold Henthorn, 58, unemployed businessman. The conviction of Harold Henthorn is a searing indictment of the public's misplaced trust in the context of stability and long-term commitment. Henthorn presented himself as the epitome of a devoted, successful husband. His life was a carefully curated performance of refinement, but his underlying motive was pure, relentless financial acquisition. The betrayal, therefore, was not just against his wife, but against the very definition of the 12th wedding anniversary they were supposedly celebrating. His facade was the ultimate weapon, ensuring no one would look too closely at the darkness he carried. The crime itself was designed to look like a simple hiking accident, or perhaps a sudden, unplanned fall. Henthorn specialized in moving in with wealthy, successful women and making them financially liable to him, or in this case, eliminating them to collect the ultimate payout. On September 29, 2012, Harold took his wife, Dr. Toni Bertoli Henthorn, on a surprise anniversary hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. Toni, who was a highly respected ophthalmologist, had no idea that her husband was secretly drowning in debt and living a fictitious life where tax returns revealed he made virtually no money for 2 decades. The ultimate aim was clear and ultimately cynical. $4.5 to $4.7 million in life insurance policies on Toni she didn't even know existed. The conflict emerged almost immediately in the investigation's details. Harold claimed Toni had fallen 128 feet off a cliff at Deer Mountain. However, investigators from the National Park Service and local police noticed Harold's suspicious composure and his immediate, self-centered focus on the rescue logistics. Furthermore, his 911 call was chillingly calm and detailed, giving the exact latitude and longitude of the fall, and specifically asking for a helicopter landing location, a level of precision wildly inconsistent with a panicked, grieving spouse. The true engine of this tragedy was not a random accident, but a classic, calculated motive cloaked in a celebratory trip. Detectives soon uncovered the telltale evidence that broke the case. A map found in Harold's car that had a pink X marking the exact spot where Toni fell. This map indicated the hike was not a surprise, but a rehearsed assassination. It was also revealed that Harold had visited the park 9 times in the 6 weeks before the murder. The transformation from grieving husband to prime suspect was swift, driven by the discovery of a previous, almost identical tragedy: the first wife connection. The crucial turning point came when investigators learned of the death of Harold's first wife, Sandra or Lynn Henthorn, who died in 1995 when a car fell on her while changing a tire. He collected a $600,000 insurance policy then, too. Originally ruled an accident, Lynn's death was changed to undetermined after Toni's fall. The prosecution hammered home the long-documented history of financial exploitation, the calculated staging of the anniversary hike, and the clear attempt to steal Toni's life. In September 2015, the jury returned its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Harold Henthorn was sentenced to mandatory life in federal prison without parole. The result was a profound crisis of trust within the professional community. A man entrusted with commitment and care had become the ultimate marital threat. This case served as a stark lesson. When respect for an individual's public image and charm supersedes critical, objective examination of their background, absolute evil can take root and flourish. Harold Henthorn's mask fell away, revealing the rot beneath his veneer of devotion. But the theme of betrayal is universal.
Vow gives the killer crucial time to execute and escape. What does this pattern tell us about the hidden contracts we sign when we say, "I do"? From the simple, calculated rage of Bradley Dawson to the cold financial malice of Kyle Pennington, the stories of these 10 men and the women who acted with the same lethal intent serve as a permanent warning. They remind us that the most frightening monsters are often hidden in the places we feel safest, wearing the most trusted disguises. The next time you hear the chime of wedding bells, remember the lessons of this countdown. Remember that sometimes the greatest monsters are hidden in the places we feel safest. If we shocked you, hit the subscribe button now to help us continue exposing the hidden truths behind the world's most unbelievable crimes. And let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Thank you for watching.